It's Wednesday, March 7th. I'm your host, Sarah Beal. On today's show, we'll talk with Chief of Police Paul McDonald. We discuss Winter Storm Riley. Then Finance Director Mark Milne joins us to discuss the FY 2019 capital budget. And finally, Town Clerk Ann Quirk joins us to discuss the town census, dog licenses, and so much more. But first, let's get a look at today's top headlines. A notice from the Massachusetts Department of Marine Fisheries. The DMF Shellfish Program is assessing the impacts on water quality and shellfish safety as a result of the nor'easter storm of March 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Due to the significant coastal flooding and rainfall associated with the coastal storm that impacted Massachusetts, all Massachusetts shellfish growing areas will continue to remain closed until further notice. The situation is further complicated by the forecast of another nor'easter beginning today, Wednesday, March 7th. DMF is in the process of assessing the impacts of last week's storm and will provide information as it becomes available. For the most up-to-date information on the status of shellfishing in the town of Barnstable, please visit the Town of Barnstable's Facebook page. The Massachusetts Department of Transportation has begun their roadway fabrication and installation of ground-mounted guide and traffic signs along Route 6. This project is estimated to be completed by May 24th. The work will consist of replacing the existing directional signs along Route 6 from Sandwich to Eastham. There are no proposed lane closures at this time. All work will be performed on the highway shoulder accompanied by a police officer. The work hours will be between the hours of 7 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. As always, please use caution when traveling through the road construction areas on Route 6, including the on and off ramps. The Barnstable Youth Commission will again be hosting their Community Prevention Forum and 7th Grade Youth Summit. The Community Prevention Forum will be held on Thursday, March 15th at Cape Cod Community College in the Tilden Art Center. The public is welcome to attend for a presentation and open discussion with a panel of Barnstable police officers to discuss, demonstrate, and share views on how we can work together to keep our community safe. The 7th Grade Youth Summit will take place the next day, also at Cape Cod Community College, with Dynamic Influence and Kevin Rosario presenting, along with BHS Peer Leadership. There will also be presentations by many clubs, sports, and activities that will be available to the 7th graders entering the high school in the fall. Coming up, Chief of Police Paul McDonald. Chief, thank you so much for joining us today. We want to talk about the storm that happened over this past weekend, Winter Storm Riley, and there's also a storm that's supposed to start today. What can you tell me about how Winter Storm Riley went?
I would say as far as severity, as far as power outages, it's probably one of the worst ones that I've seen. I know we've had more severe storms as far as snow accumulations, but as far as the sheer power outages and inconvenience, this was one of the worst. At one point, early Saturday morning, we up to 70% of our residents were without power. Although it was not that cold, there was no snow, it was still a huge inconvenience. And a lot of the power they're predicting was not going to be restored until Monday or Tuesday of this week. I gave Eversource a lot of credit. They worked as hard as they possibly could, but they're limited because of this long-lasting storm. It went for a couple of days. And if they have sustained wind gusts of 30 miles per hour, they can't put those bucket trucks up. I mean, you can't expect anyone to win those bucket trucks when the wind's blowing, because you're dealing with high voltage wires, and those trucks could very easily topple over. So they were erring on the side of caution, which is what they should do. But I give them a lot of credit. Everybody's up and running. As of yesterday morning, Tuesday, there was just a little over 400 residents in the town of Barnstable still without power, and I know they were all expected to be on power by Tuesday night.
Wonderful. I mean, it was an amazing storm. The wind, I think we had the highest gust of wind in the town of Barnstable. They were clocked at 93 miles per hour.
Right.
That is some heavy winds.
That's blowing. There's a lot of tree damage. Even though Eversource has taken some precautions and they put some new breaker lines in, once those tree limbs come down or the poles come down, they take the wires with them. It's just good old-fashioned hard work. You got to go back down there, put the poles back in, and put the wires back up again. So they did a great job. And of course the storm. We were inundated with requests for the shelter only because the Eversource was telling people that they could be without power for at least 3 or 4 days. The Regional Emergency Planning Committee decided to open 3 shelters, one down in Falmouth, one here in Barnstable, and the other one down at Howard. Saturday afternoon, we opened it up at 5 o'clock, and we had 15 individuals stay there from different areas of the Cape. I believe 9 of them were from the town of Barnstable, and 6 other individuals from different parts of the Cape, and 2 dogs and 1 cat stayed at the shelter.
That's great. I'm so happy that the shelter was able to be opened and that people were able to
Yep.
utilize it. You
Yep.
obviously did a really good job of getting the word out about that. I saw it all over Facebook. People were saying, if you still don't have power, the shelter is open in Barnstable, and I knew that the one in Harwich and Falmouth were also open. I'm so glad that people took advantage of that. Like you said, it wasn't a snowstorm where there was, people were trapped in their homes. It was, people were without power for a long amount of
Right.
time, and that can cause some issues. So I'm glad to hear that people took advantage of going to the shelter.
It gave everyone an option. Maybe they did not use the shelter, but they knew the shelter was open. There's some people decided they'll wait it out, but if it got too cold, they always had the option to go to the shelter. We received several hundred calls regarding the shelter. I know some of the fire departments have received the calls. So that's why we decided to open it. 15 individuals did take advantage of it, but a lot of people had a peace of mind knowing that it's there if they need it. There was no snow on the ground, so they could always drive to it. So it worked out well.
Now, we have another storm coming up
Yes.
today and into tomorrow. What kind of advice would you give to the residents of the town of Barnstable in preparation for the storm, and maybe some things that they should think about?
Well, they're not predicting storm to any near the degree the last one was. Most of the Cape, they're saying mostly rain. Sometime late tonight, it might turn over to snow, and if it does turn over to snow, the biggest problem that we have is people want to go out. They want to go out for a ride. Please drive cautiously. You have to change the way you drive when you have when you have different weather conditions. Because the car crashes, you block up the road, the plows can't go through. It causes all kinds of problems for us. But if the snow does get heavy and they are predicting gusts of winds 40 to 60 miles per hour, that means there's a possibility of power outages again, and the wires could come down. And again, we just go through the same process we went through last weekend. If we have to open the shelter up again, we certainly will open the shelter.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you, Chief, so much for joining us today and chatting with us about this, these storms. And we're not out of the woods yet. So
No, we're not. It's still wintertime.
Technically, yes.
Oh, no, it hasn't been a bad winter.
It hasn't been. We've been very lucky, knock on wood, that it stays that way.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Okay,
Good talking
Chief,
to you.
have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye. My guest today was Barnstable Police Chief Paul McDonald. Coming up, Town Clerk Ann Quirk, but first, Finance Director Mark Milne. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to talk about the FY 2019 capital budget and the FY 2019, FY 2023 capital improvement plan, which I have a picture of the cover page here for people that are looking for it. It is available on the town website. It is 340 pages, so don't print it.
Right.
You'll want to look at it on the town website, because if you print 340 pages, you'll probably run out of paper and you'll run out of ink.
That's right.
Yep. But it's a very well put together booklet to kind of let people know and explain everything about the capital budget and the capital improvement plan.
Sure. Yes. Well, to start with, the first thing we do is every year is ask departments to provide us a list of their submissions or what their plans are for the next 5 years, what they see coming down the pipeline for improvements that are needed town-wide, including our school department and all of our enterprise funds. And so the submissions we received this year totaled, I think, 125 projects, totaling about $250 million. So naturally, we can't fund all of that in 1 year or even 5 years, for that matter. So what we do is we go through a review process that tries to, in an attempt to prioritize what are the most important projects that need funding in the immediate fiscal year or fiscal year 19, and what can we possibly or realistically do over the next 5 years. And so this document presents both that FY19 proposal by the town manager as well as what we think we can do over the next 5 years. So that what we do with the review process we switched that up a little bit this year. We had an additional a meeting added to the review process by bringing all department managers together in a workshop type format for an entire day, where every department got up and presented their highest priority projects to the entire group, and it offered the opportunity to ask questions from the other department managers so that they get a better sense as to what the project involves and how it may impact the town and how it might relate to a particular project perhaps in their department and so forth. So it was a real educational process for all of us to hear the highest priorities from every department. And we asked them to categorize those projects using 4 specific priorities, whether it was imperative that we do that project, essential that we do that project, important that we do that project, or desirable. We basically broke it down into those 4 categories with examples as to what would be an imperative project versus an essential project, and everybody voted. And so after that evaluation process, we took the highest ranking projects and subjected them to the second phase, which requires those department managers to go through 10 specific criteria and score those highest priority projects against those 10 criteria. So it's a second evaluation phase that we go through. And the reason why we do all of this evaluation, again, is to try to create some objectivity to the process, make sure that we're addressing the highest priorities in the town. And when all that shakes out, we come up with a list, a prioritized list, and we provide that to the town manager, and we meet with department heads, and we start reviewing the results of those evaluations. And based on the results of those evaluations and the input that we receive in those meetings from the town department heads, the manager develops his proposed budget for the ensuing fiscal year, which is about just over $18 million, which involves about 35 different projects. And the main funding sources for the program include bond issuances, cash reserves, enterprise fund reserves, cash reserves both in enterprise funds and general funds, as well as the newer sewer construction and private way maintenance fund that we have.
Wow, it's quite the process to go through all of these projects and to come out at the other end with 35 projects. I think that's pretty good, and they're all listed in this booklet. One of the things I wanted to ask you a question about was the status of existing capital appropriation balances. There are balances left over from previous capital projects, correct?
Yes, that's a good point. As part of our review process every year, one of the things that we do is we ask every department to review the existing capital appropriations that we have, what the status of the particular project is, and if there are remaining funds available after completing a project, we can utilize those remaining funds to help fund the next year's capital budget. And so by going through that, as part of that review process, we discovered 4 projects that have been completed with remaining balances of about $443,000 in total, and we're going to take those monies and reappropriate them towards 4 new projects that are included in the FY19 program.
That's wonderful, and that's great. That's part of the review process, because now you have a little bit, it's not making a huge dent in the cost of the 35 projects, but it is something, so that's great that you can continue, and that's a new thing you'll do every year.
Yes, every year we go through that process of reviewing the existing capital appropriations, and there are quite a few of them. In Part 3 of the Capital Improvement Program book, there's a complete list of all the existing active capital appropriations, and there's about 100 of them, over 100 of them. Wow. And so there's a lot of projects being managed simultaneously here, in addition to the 35 that are coming forward. But a lot of these will get knocked off in fiscal year 18. They'll be completed, and when we go to develop the fiscal year 20 capital improvement plan, there will more likely than not be some remaining funds available from completed projects that we can redirect towards that program. And so that's part of the review process every year, is to utilize remaining balances from other appropriations.
Wonderful. Let's talk a little bit about the FY 2019, FY 23 capital improvements plan. This is a 5-year plan, correct?
Yes. So part of something new that we did this year is we added this section to the book to try to present to the reader and to the public, what could we realistically fund, providing that many assumptions hold true, over the next 5 years in terms of capital improvements. As I mentioned before, we had about $250 million in submissions, but realistically, using some conservative assumptions, we can get to about what we feel about $175 million of those $250 million in submissions, based on current funding resources that we can reasonably anticipate being available. So that's a pretty good dent. 175 million out of 250 million is a pretty significant portion of what's been submitted, but we're still $75 million short of every single project being funded within the next 5 years. So it's more like a 10-year plan, let's say, as far as being able to get to every single one of those projects. So every year we're always looking to find more resources, to make more resources available to the capital side of our budget without sacrificing operations.
Right.
And so that's a challenge. So you look for grant funds as the first place you go for. You're always looking for grant funds. We try to be shovel-ready on many of our construction projects so that if state and federal dollars become available, we're first in line to receive a grant to help with the construction of something. Like the Armory, for example, there was the Senate bond bill recently approved the $1.6 million in funding for that project. Once that bill gets reconciled with the House version of the bill, and if that $1.6 million for the Armory survives and the governor approves it, we'll be ready to go because we have design money in this plan to get that project initiated, so that when that $1.6 million comes available, we can start some construction over there.
That's wonderful, and that's great. That's kind of how the town works. Is you ask for the money, but you're ready to go as soon as you're able to get it. The last thing I want to talk about is the actual recommendation of the 2019 plan. That's going to go before the town council in April, correct?
Yes, we're going to have the first reading next Thursday night, March 15th, and the public hearings will begin on April 5th.
Wonderful. So now the next process of this is the town council reviewing all of these this capital budget and approving or not approving the plan as it is.
That's right.
Correct.
Next step in the process is those public hearings and seeing whether or not the appropriations are funded.
Wonderful. Mark, thank you so much for all your hard work in putting this together, and thank you so much for joining us today to talk about it. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. My guest today is Mark Milne. He's the finance director here in the town of Barnstable. And thank you so much for joining us today and for your monthly chat. We were going to talk about the census, which I know we've talked about 2 other times before, but I hope they're starting to wind down. You're not getting so many a day, but are you still getting a lot of censuses returns?
Today we get about 100 in the mail.
Okay.
So they're still trickling in, and that's fine. We want to get them in, so we're going to take them no matter when we get them.
Right.
I'm not sure that there's too many going into the libraries anymore, but we've been out to check them a couple of times.
So it's not too late to return your census, even though it is basically March.
Yes.
You can still return them. So if you still have it sitting at home somewhere, or you got it and you lost it,
yeah, please get it into us, because really it's important, because I have to come up with that list of persons for the town of Barnstable. And I have a time limit on that. I have to have it done by a certain time frame according to the state. And that's an important document because, as I told you, I think the last time I was here, we had a lady who was looking to recover some money from the state of Massachusetts, but could not prove that she lived in Osterville with her aunt for 3 or 4 years because she was never put on the census.
yeah. It's important.
It's
important.
very important.
It affects so many different things in the town. It takes less than a minute to do if you don't have to make any changes to it.
Yeah.
You have to make changes to it. Okay, 5 minutes. You
Yeah.
have to add some people on it, take some people off,
Right.
and just send it back in. You can drop it off here. You can drop it at the library, put it in the mail.
Exactly.
Easy. Just return it.
Easy.
Just return it. If you've lost it,
Call us.
Yeah, I was just going to say, call the clerk's office.
Absolutely. We'll take their calls anytime. We'll send something out. We'll talk with them. If nothing has changed, we'll update it right then and there.
Perfect. Excellent.
Just let us know.
Right. It's important. The census is important. We also want to talk about dog license renewals because I know it's that season. Getting dog license renewals, getting ready for Barnstable's Best Dog.
Yes, we are. It's a fun time for all of us, and it's a fun time for people when they come into the office because we have a bulletin board, and we put those pictures right up on the bulletin board with a number underneath them. And you come into the office and you want to get a birth record, or you're going to get married and you want to fill out your paperwork. you can vote. Vote for the dog that you think is the cutest, or whatever your choice is.
Right.
And we count them up that first week of May, so we can make sure we have all of our votes counted up, and we know who's going to be the Barnstable's best dog and get that number 1 tag.
That number 1 tag. It's important to make sure that your dog is licensed.
Yes.
In the town of Barnstable is law.
It's law in the state.
In the state.
As well as in the town. So you have to be licensed. The dogs have to be licensed. And it really works out well for the dogs when they are licensed, because we had a phone call from a lady who was so upset that her dog got out, and he never gets out. It's a small dog. Unfortunately, we have some predators now around like coyotes, and they'll go after the dog, little ones. And she was all upset, and she called us, and we found her dog tag, and we called the ACO, the Animal Control Officer's office, and they went out looking, and someone found the dog and called us and said, hey, we have this little dog, we found it roaming around, and we know that it's lost, and we were able to get that dog back to that owner. It's important. It's really, really important.
It is important, and they wear the tag, and then if something like that happens, they're able to be contacted and said, okay, we found your dog. Or,
yes. Give us that dog tag number.
Yes.
We can find them.
Yes. Good. So, and it's so fun for the voting for the Barnstable's best dog, and so it's it's in your if you have a really cute dog, or a dog that you think is really you got a cute picture of your dog, because sometimes it's the picture.
Sometimes it's the picture.
It's not necessarily the dog. It's maybe what the dog is doing in the picture that sometimes edges out some of the other dogs.
I think that's what it was last year. The dog looked like he was driving the car or the truck or whatever.
Yep, exactly. So it makes it a little fun. So send those pictures in along with your license renewal or your new license for your dog, and have a little bit of fun, and then come in and vote.
Absolutely.
Good time to drop off your census.
That's right. And you can either pay for the dog license through the mail with a check, or you can come in and see us.
Yeah.
We try to make it as easy as possible.
Exactly. The last thing we want to talk about is that there are nominations for different candidates going on right now, and people are pulling papers, and so we want to make sure people are aware that that's going on right now. If you're interested in running for office, what do you have to do to come to the town clerk's office to do that?
Well, you decide if you would like to run for the state senate or for
state rep.
Come on down to see us. We just have to verify that you're a voter in the town of Barnstable, which we will do. You take those papers, you go out and get your signatures. So depending upon what you're running for will determine the amount of signatures you have to have. But I've seen people set up at the Cape Cod Mall collecting signatures for their candidate or the candidate of their choice. This is something anybody can do. We're all voters. We're all capable of doing this. It's the time and effort that you have to put in. And what happens is, once those pages are filled, you have to bring them back to the town clerk's office. And we have to certify those signatures. So we're getting those in large chunks. They're coming into us of people in the town of Barnstable who have signed papers. We're working as quickly as we can. And also right now, we're getting papers for the fire districts, because they have water commissioners and fire commissioners, and those are all voted in as well. So we're getting them from all the different fire department districts, the people who are running for office, and they don't need as many signatures, anywhere near as many, but they're out there knocking on doors and trying to get signatures, so don't be surprised.
At the grocery store.
Yeah.
Something I always think about when I sign those is, and I think that maybe some people don't understand, just by signing it, you're not endorsing a candidate. This is not signing you up to vote for it. It's just saying, yep, I live in the town. Yeah, you want to be on the ballot? Okay, I'll sign this so that you can be on the ballot. I think some people get hesitant to sign those sometimes because they're worried that it's, they're locked into that candidate or something like that. But it's just saying, yep, I live in this town. Yep, you can run for office. Sounds good to me, kind of
That's
thing.
exactly correct, Sarah. And that is something that a lot of people are confused on. The other thing is, when they sign that paper, they have to give their address. It's part of the deal as far as the state is concerned, and any time, whether it's local government or state government or federal government, everything is the same. It's your name and your address. And a post office box, no one can live in a post office box. It actually has to be your address where you live.
Physical address, correct.
Right. So that's what we use, because if we can't read the signature, then at least we can look at that address and see if we can kind of figure out what that name is with that address.
Based on that address,
Yeah.
right. And it's not being used for anything other than that.
That's all.
Yep. I think it's good for people to understand that, especially with the election season coming up. You're going to see a lot more people out there collecting signatures.
Yes, and they may be knocking on your door. You know, you will have people going door to door, I'm
Yep.
sure, because the more you know the people that are out there, the better you have of deciding who's going to get your vote.
Right.
Because your vote is your voice. And that you want your voice to be heard.
Exactly. And that's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
I look forward to chatting with you again next month.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My guest today is Ann Quirk. She's the town clerk here in the town of Barnstable. Now let's take a look at this week's board, committee, and commission schedule. Thank you for joining us today. We'll be back tomorrow with an all-new episode of Barnstable Today. On Thursday's show, we'll talk with Town Manager Mark Ells and State Rep Will Crocker. For Barnstable Today, I'm Sarah Beal.